We're here. NBA trade deadline. It's an exciting time. This is an exciting time of the year in the National Basketball Association. Playoffs are a couple months away. And now we have the trade deadline is here. It's upon us, and it's over. February 10th, 3 o'clock, the deadline ended, and we got a big deal. A couple big deals, but we got a real big deal. Ben Simmons is finally free. Ben Simmons is finally free. He is finally, he did say he had some mental things going on, but at this point, Ben Simmons is finally free. Ben Simmons is on his way to the Brooklyn Nets. Yes, he's on his way to the Brooklyn Nets. And, you look at it now. I mean, this could be an interesting deal for both ball clubs. This could be an interesting deal for both teams. I mean, if you look at it, right, you have the Brooklyn Nets who are going to get Ben Simmons, who arguably is one of the best defenders in the game of basketball. I mean, he easily could have been Defensive Player of the Year last year. So Ben Simmons is arguably one of the best defenders in basketball. You still have Kyrie Irving on the road, and you still have Kevin Durant. So you still have enough scoring there if you're the Brooklyn Nets. Now you add in a piece like Ben Simmons, a big-time defender, a guy, Brooklyn's had some issues on the defensive end of the basketball court. You add Ben Simmons into that mix, and we can say what we want about Ben Simmons, right? We could talk about him, in the free throw shooting. We could talk about him in the shooting jumpers and all that. But Ben Simmons still is a player that you can win with. You can win with Ben Simmons. He's a player that you can win with. And I think with this situation where you have your scoring in Kyrie Irving, you have your scoring in Kevin Durant, you don't need Ben Simmons' scoring. The problem was when he was with the Sixers, they needed his scoring. The Brooklyn Nets don't need Ben Simmons to score. They need Ben Simmons to facilitate. They need Ben Simmons to play defense. They need Ben Simmons to rebound. But they don't need Ben Simmons to be a scorer. The Sixers needed Ben Simmons' scoring, and that was an issue. That's why, his issues were magnified. It's because the Sixers needed his scoring. The Brooklyn Nets do not. Brooklyn does not need his scoring. So for them, they get a guy, obviously, who's going to defend. For them, they get a guy who's going to bring it every night on the defensive end. They get a guy who, is able to. I mean, Ben Simmons can score a little bit. He could drive to the basket. He has some decent drives to the basket. Obviously, we don't know what he worked on in the offseason. We haven't seen Ben Simmons. So we don't know what he has done in the offseason to get better. And here's the deal again. Brooklyn sends James Harden to the Sixers, along with Paul Millsap I saw earlier. I don't know if we've got to see whether that's true or not, but it was Paul Millsap for Ben Simmons, Steph Curry, Andre Drummond, and 2 first-round picks. So you got that on the table. I mean, you look at it, I think this is a deal that's going to help both teams. I really do. I think this is a deal where both teams can win. If you're Brooklyn, you got Ben Simmons, you got Kyrie, you got Durant, obviously, and you got 2 legitimate bona fide scorers in Kyrie and Durant. That's the Nets. For the Sixers, right? You have James. If you watch the Sixers over the past couple seasons, you notice one of their biggest issue is they didn't have a guy who was elite off the dribble that could get you a bucket down the stretch. They didn't have that guy, right? They had Jimmy Butler a couple years ago. Jimmy Butler was that guy who took the last second shot for the Philadelphia 76ers. The Sixers haven't had a guy like that, a guy who is elite off the dribble, a guy that can get you a bucket when you need a bucket. They haven't had a guy like that. They have now a guy in and James Harden who is elite off the dribble. He is elite off the dribble. So James Harden's a guy that can score. He's still a bona fide scorer. He's still a big-time scorer. So you add now, and you look at the Sixers starting lineup, and you look at Brooklyn's starting lineup, right? We look at both of their starting lineups right there, right? You got Brooklyn. Let's look at Brooklyn's starting lineup, right? So Kyrie, maybe Seth Curry. We'll see how they run that. Kevin Durant, Ben Simmons, and LaMarcus Aldridge, right? That's still a bona fide, big time, solid, legitimate starting lineup and a championship caliber starting lineup. You look at the Philadelphia 76ers and what they bring to the table. That's big time too. You're talking about James Harden, Joel Embiid, two of the best scorers in this game at this point. Tobias Harris, who has played some decent basketball of late. The up-and-coming Tyrese Maxey. Got Danny Green there. That could be Matisse Thybulle there at that spot. So you still got scoring. You still got Matisse. And here's also the thing. Philadelphia did not have to part with Matisse Thybulle and also with Tyrese Maxey. They did not have to start. I mean, they didn't have to get rid of those guys. And so for Daryl Morey to be able to pull this off without having to give up Maxey, without having to give up Thybulle, that's also big. That is also big. We could talk about the picks, but the picks for me don't necessarily concern me if I'm the Sixers. Because I think the Sixers at this point, here's the thing. With Joel Embiid, your window is only so small, right? I mean, Embiid is a guy who has stayed healthy this year, but he's had issues with health over the years, right? So Embiid and Harden together, the Sixers needed to. You don't have much time with Joel Embiid. You don't have much time. So you got to move, and you got to put him in position where he can win a championship. Without James Harden, do I think if they didn't make this deal, if the Sixers stayed pat, do I think they would could make a run in the Eastern Conference? Definitely, because the Eastern Conference is very wide open. It's wide open this year. It was wide open last year, and it's wide open this year. So, yes, I do think the Sixers could have made a run if they didn't make this deal. But with this deal, with James Harden, with Joel Embiid, who is the MVP at this point, if the season ended today, Joel Embiid would be the MVP of this NBA, right? So with Embiid, with Harden, I mean, you now have, again, two of the best scorers in the game of basketball. And then you got guys who can score in different ways. Obviously, Embiid can score in the post, and he can score in other ways as well, off the dribble, right? He can face. And now you got James Harden, who is a bona fide scorer. He's still a bona fide scorer. He's still a bucket. James Harden is a walking bucket. And so you got that walking bucket coming into Philadelphia. And they ain't had a walking bucket. They ain't had a guy who can do what James Harden can do off the dribble probably since Iverson, right? Probably since Iverson. When Iverson left, what was that, 2006 or 7, one of those years when he went to trade to Denver. But they haven't had a guy who can do it off the bounce the way James Harden can do it since Iverson, right? But you now are in position where you have Harden and Embiid. And Philadelphia and the way this Eastern Conference is. I mean, the Eastern Conference it's like jam-packed up there, with the top teams in there. But I'm not going to sit here and say, well, Philadelphia isn't better than Philadelphia can't compete with Milwaukee. I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to say Philadelphia can't compete with Miami. I'm not going to say that. I mean, the Bulls as well. I think they could have competed with these teams without this move. But obviously now making this move, they most definitely can compete with these teams. If they didn't make this move, they could compete with these teams. I mean, they could compete with the Heat and the Bulls and the Bucks, right? At this point, Philadelphia, 2.5 games out of the top spot in the East, which is held by the Miami Heat. I don't think if you're Cleveland, if you're Chicago, if you're Milwaukee, if you're Philadelphia, you're not afraid of the Miami Heat. The Miami Heat are very beatable. They're playing very well, but again, you're not afraid of the Miami Heat. There's no team in the Eastern Conference where you're saying you're afraid of this team. There's none of that in the East. The East, I mean, you look at, people sleep, Cleveland Cavaliers, right? We're shocked that they were able, and they're in the position that they're in. But with the addition of Karis LeVert and the way that team plays, with Karis LeVert and Darius Garland, two guys that can get buckets, obviously with the bigs, with Evan Mobley, the rookie, the way he's playing, and then Jared Allen, who easily should have been an all-star this year, Cleveland is a team that you have to watch. I mean, Cleveland is a good basketball team. They play the right way. They defend. I mean, they got size, obviously. I mean, they throw out a starting lineup with Mobley and Marketing and Jared Allen, 6'10" and above. I mean, you got that there in your starting lineup, and it has been successful for the Cavaliers. So don't sleep on the Cleveland Cavaliers at this point. I mean, they're one game behind the top spot in the East. It's amazing. No one would have thought that the Cleveland Cavaliers would be one game out of the top spot in the Eastern Conference at this point of the season. That's unreal. That's unbelievable. That really is unbelievable that the Cavaliers are where they are. But hey, they're well coached. And now with LeVert and Darius Garland, you got two guys that can do it off the dribble. See, Cleveland needed LeVert. They needed another guy who can do it off the dribble. They needed another guy who can create a shot at a high level, right? And here's also the thing. When you start looking at this league and you start looking at the playoffs, and when the game slows down a little bit, you need guys who can get buckets. You need guys that when a shot clock is running down can get you a bucket. James Harden is that dude, right? He is that dude. A Kevin Durant, he is that dude. A Kyrie Irving, he is that dude, right? Those guys are able to do that. Philadelphia did not have that. Philadelphia did not have that guy, right? If you watch the Sixers, again, if you watch this team over the past couple of years, perfect example is the playoffs. In those playoffs against the Atlanta Hawks, down the stretch there, in that game 7, you had turnovers by Embiid. Obviously, you had Simmons, running away from a dunk. You had so that offensively they weren't really executing in that particular game down the stretch there. Now you have a guy in James Harden who can say, move out the way, let me do my thing down the stretch. Philadelphia needed that. They needed an elite guy off the dribble, and they've got their elite guy off the dribble. Now, obviously, when you talk about the Philadelphia 76ers, you have to talk about health, and you have to talk about the health of Joel Embiid. Unfortunately, he has been a guy that has struggled with health, and it's not been at great times, right? He struggled with health. We saw last year in the first round there where he had a knee issue against the Washington Wizards. They were ultimately able to get by that, and he was ultimately able to be healthy, but he wasn't completely healthy against the Atlanta Hawks. But he got it done, right? He got it done. So you look at, in that particular sense, he got it done. They did what they needed to do, right? But again, this guy has had trouble with health. And so, and I will say this year, everything seems to be a little different with Embiid. Embiid looks like a different player this season. He looks like he's in tip-top shape, right? He looks like he understands the game better this year. He's getting any and every shot that he wants this year. I mean, this guy is playing some big-time basketball. And so when you look at the Philadelphia 76ers, it comes down to them having to win now because you don't know how many years you got out of Joel Embiid. You don't know. You don't know. So you have to move now, and you have to make that plunge now. I know he's 27 years old, but still, we've seen the guy in terms of his health. He's not been the pillar of health. So at the end of the day, you got to move, and you got to win now. The process has been over. The process has been over years ago for the Philadelphia 76ers, but the time is now for them to win. And they have a legitimate shot, I think they could beat any team at this point in the NBA in a 7-game series. The Philadelphia 76ers can beat any team in the NBA in a 7-game series. But I might be able to say that about a few teams in the Eastern Conference. Might be able to say about a few teams in the West as well. It's clear if you look at the West, it's going to come down to the Suns and the Golden State Warriors. Those are the two best teams in the Western Conference and maybe the two best teams in basketball. But if I'm the Sixers, the Sixers actually played the Suns the other night, lost to Phoenix 114-109 in Philadelphia. But that was a game where the Sixers down the stretch, they had some struggles. They had some struggles down the stretch, and we all know how Phoenix is. Phoenix is so clutch down the stretch. Their ability to close games with Chris Paul and Devin Booker is second to none. I mean, I believe they're 22-5 in terms of clutch games. So that team down the stretch, they know how to handle their business. They know how to put all the guys in the right places, in the right spots, and make all the plays necessary to get the W. That's the Phoenix Suns, and that's what they do. But the Philadelphia 76ers the other night against the Suns, lost to the Suns. If they had a guy like James Harden, who, again, get you a bucket, again, can get you an easy bucket, again, can do it elite off the dribble, well, it might have been a different situation. It may have been a different situation. But again, we'll see what happens. And again, there's going to be some adjustments. But, once they get those adjustments out the way, James Harden's the baller and Joel Embiid's a baller. And according to reports, James Harden has opted into his contract, $47.6 million. So he's opted into his deal. So he's under contract for next season because obviously at the end of the season, he had the option to opt out, but he has reportedly opted in. So he is in the Sixers, or he's in for the Sixers next year as well. So again, the Sixers got their guy. Daryl Morey got his boy James Harden, right? He didn't get him from Houston, but he had to go get him from Brooklyn. And there was always reports that Ben Simmons, that Morey wanted to move Simmons and had his eye on James Harden. There were reports he had his eye on James Harden over the summer. He was waiting for James Harden the summer coming up. He was waiting for James Harden to become free. But ultimately, they move now. And now, good question, after Harden and Simmons trade, does Philly have enough defense to match up against top teams in the East? Well, I say yes, because they still have Danny Green, who is a solid defender. They still have Matisse Thybulle, who is one of the better defenders in this league, and a guy who may pocket some Defensive Player of the Year awards. You still got Joel Embiid, who's still a solid rim protector. So, yes, I think Philadelphia will be fine on the defensive end. I think Philadelphia will be absolutely fine on the defensive end, without – obviously, they didn't have Ben Simmons all year, and obviously James Harden is not known for his defense, right? But at the same time, you still got some decent defenders in Philadelphia. Again, Danny Green is solid. Thybulle, again, could win a bunch of Defensive Player of the Year awards, right? Maxey is not a bad defender. And again, you have Joel Embiid as your rim protector. So, yeah, this team still is going to be able to defend at a decent level, right? I think, if we look at Brooklyn, I don't know if this deal is going to be able to save what is going on in Brooklyn at this point. I don't know. I mean, obviously, Brooklyn now is the 8th seed in the Eastern Conference. And, we don't know when Durant is going to come back. And when he does come back, right, I mean, this team is still – they're going to have to – you still have the situation with Kyrie, who plays only the road games. And then you have the whole situation with you got Ben Simmons. I mean, the guy hasn't played a basketball game all year, so how long is it going to take for him to get right? So if you're Brooklyn and you're in the 8th spot at this point, you're in a playing situation at this point. If you're Brooklyn, you got to put these pieces together. You got to try to work the chemistry to make sure the chemistry is right. That may take time. And, I mean, Brooklyn, 54 games, 28 games left. So 28 games to kind of get this together, get this right, and also at the same time still try to win so you can make the playoffs. Now, I look at who's at 11, 12, and 13. The Wizards, they did add Kristaps Porzingis today, but Bradley Beal's out for the season. So I don't envision the Wizards doing much. Those 10 teams that are there now will probably be the 10 teams that are going to be in the playoffs. Obviously, 7 through 10 will be in the playing situation. So Boston, Brooklyn, Charlotte, Atlanta, those. How about Toronto's playing some big time basketball, put themselves in position now, 6th spot in the Eastern Conference. But 7 through 10, Boston, Brooklyn, Charlotte, and Atlanta, and Boston's also playing some big time basketball. Won 6 straight at this point. Toronto won 7 straight. So, at this point, if you're Brooklyn, they lost 9 straight. And at this point, Kevin Durant is not walking through that door at this point. And they're expecting him to be back at some point. But you still got Ben Simmons. And how long is it going to take Ben Simmons to get himself, apparently he has some mental things going on. That's what they're saying. That's what his camp is saying. Got some things going on mentally. So how long is it going to take him to overcome that? And also the physical. You haven't played a basketball game in a long, long time. So you got the physical, you got the mental when it comes to Ben Simmons. So he has to figure Brooklyn has to figure all those things out and put all those things together to make this thing work. And it might take time. So it's not a foregone conclusion that Brooklyn's going to make the playoffs, but more than likely, based on looking at the Eastern Conference, looking at the landscape of the Eastern Conference, Brooklyn is probably going to be there. They just might have to be in a playing situation. And if you look at the Brooklyn Nets, right, the beauty for the Brooklyn Nets is with the COVID vaccine mandates in New York City, Kyrie can't play at home. So he's going to be on the road. And if you're a lower seed, well, you're going to play at least 4 games at somebody else's building. So that means you have 4 games of Kyrie Irving. So that is a benefit for the Brooklyn Nets. But it's not easy to just turn this thing on and just get right back at it. And so for the Brooklyn Nets, I don't know if this move is going to do anything for them this year. I'm not dismissing Brooklyn, but you can't dismiss Brooklyn when you have a Kyrie Irving, a Kevin Durant, and a Ben Simmons in your starting lineup. That can't be dismissed. But they still got to learn how to play together. They still got to learn how to work off each other. They still got to build chemistry. So all these things have to be built. All these things have to be done in order for these things to work. And so there might not be enough time. There may not be enough time because obviously sometimes when you're building chemistry, you're going to have some hiccups. You're going to have some hiccups. And so Brooklyn, at this point, you can't really afford hiccups. You really can't. I'm dismissing Washington, New York, and Indiana at this point in terms of them trying to come up and possibly get into one of those playing spots. But what? Wizards are 4.5. That's not insurmountable. But, at the same time, it is still a decent lead for the Brooklyn Nets. Again, I'm not sitting here and saying that the Brooklyn Nets are going to bounce out of the 10s, not be one of the top 10 teams in the Eastern Conference this year. I'm not saying that. I think I would be crazy to say something like that. But what I am saying is they very well easily could be playing in the play-in tournament. And again, here's the thing about the playoffs. The more games you play, the more chances of injury. So you don't want to be in a situation, and so that's why, in the first round, when you have, when you are a top team and you're playing a lower seeded team, you want to get that team out early. You don't want to play extra games. And so you want to beat those teams in 4 or 5. 4 would be optimal, but 5, it's okay as well. You don't want to be going 6, 7 games if you're a top seeded team against a lower seeded team. Because again, the more games you play, the more you're susceptible to injuries, and the more, obviously an injury can derail your championship aspirations. It's that simple. So, Brooklyn, it's going to be interesting. I think long term with Durant, Simmons, and Kyrie Irving, I think that's going to be formidable. I think Simmons is going to be in the appropriate place. Here's the thing. You remember when they had Jimmy Butler, 2019. Jimmy Butler was in Philadelphia, right? And in the playoffs, Jimmy had the ball in his hand a lot. And in fact, Ben Simmons spent a lot of time in the corner, right, with Jimmy Butler bringing the ball up, right, and Jimmy Butler facilitating the offense. And so Ben Simmons wasn't ineffective because he's still an elite defender. But you weren't necessarily relying on his scoring. You weren't relying on his scoring. And so now again, and at the time, Philadelphia had Jimmy Butler and Tobias Harris and Joel Embiid. So Ben Simmons, in theory, was like the fourth option, right? And now in Brooklyn, he's not the number one option, clearly not the number two option, and maybe around the 3 or 4 option 3 or 4. But late in games, if you're Philadelphia, late in games, if you're Brooklyn late in games, obviously Kevin Durant is going to be doing some big time things and putting up big time shots. So, the reality is, again, Simmons might not be in a position where he has to give up a dunk, or not give up a dunk, or pass off a dunk, right? Instead of trying to dunk it against the Atlanta Hawks, he passed it. They may not have to do that. He may not be in that position, right? But at the same time, if you're in a position to dunk the basketball, you got to dunk the basketball, right? It's just pretty much that simple. If you're in a position to dunk the basketball, right? That it doesn't get any simpler than that. Dunk the basketball. And so he didn't dunk the basketball. He passed it off. And ultimately, him passing it off, we all know what it led to. It led to this moment right here. If Ben Simmons would have dunked that ball against the Atlanta Hawks, maybe we're not here today, right? Maybe Ben Simmons and Philadelphia are still together, and maybe they would have made a long playoff run last season, right? Maybe that's what would have happened. But, here's the thing. He didn't, and ultimately it led to what we have here. Game 7 last season against the Atlanta Hawks brought us to this place. Where Ben's, and here's the thing, I tweeted this out the other day, right? I said, Daryl Morey, talks a lot. And Daryl Morey, he said in the interview, this thing could last 4 years because Ben Simmons is under contract for that long. This thing could last for a long time. I didn't think Daryl Morey was going to go into the offseason with this still over his head. I didn't think Ben Simmons was going to come back and be on the, play this year for the Philadelphia 76ers. And I didn't think he was going to sit out the whole year. I don't think that was going to happen. No way. So, I knew, obviously there was a lot of smoke in terms of, Brian Windhorst. Actually, Brian Windhorst and Woj were kind of going, they had kind of different stories. Windhorst was saying, the teams are engaging, Brooklyn and Philadelphia are engaging. They're about to make a deal, things of that nature. And Woj kind of said the opposite. Teams haven't talked in forever, yada, yada, yada. But ultimately, it came to fruition. It was just a lot of smoke. There's a lot of smoke out there. And then ultimately that fire was lit when they made this deal. So Ben Simmons is finally going to play. Here's also the thing. Interestingly enough, the Brooklyn Nets come to Philadelphia on March 10th. Now, what are we today? We are at February 10th. So March 10th, that's a month. You got, like I said, you got the mental things going on with Ben Simmons, allegedly. And then you have, the physical thing. Obviously, he has to get himself in physical shape, tip-top shape, to be able to, get on a basketball court. Obviously, it's hard to simulate a game. You got to get on the basketball court, right? So you have that situation. Ben Simmons, theoretically, in theory, maybe a month from now, Ben Simmons could easily be a guy who returns to Philadelphia on March 10th, right? He could return to Philadelphia on March 10th. We talk about the Cavs. Cavs amazing season, top 4 defense in the NBA, top defense in the East. Yes, Cleveland is a big time a team that defends. And with LeVert, obviously with all that length with Mobley and Markkanen and Allen, now you got more length in LeVert, the 6'6" LeVert. So, I'll get back to Cleveland for a second, but I'll get back to Cleveland. I want to say something real quick about Cleveland. But you look at Philadelphia, and if Ben Simmons comes to Philadelphia, my goodness, that would be that would be fun. But I'd be shocked if Brooklyn let that happen. I think I think one of the reasons Ben Simmons didn't want to come back is he didn't want to face that Philadelphia fan base. Now, I do think the Philadelphia fan base would have eventually forgotten. And here's what you got to understand about people. People forget fast. People forget really, really fast. Perfect example. We look at Michael Vick, right? Coming into the situation with Philadelphia, people were talking about, whatever he did with the dogs and things of that nature, right? But as soon as Michael Vick started balling, as soon as Michael Vick started going to a Pro Bowl and things of that nature, fans forgot for the most part. So people forget. If Ben Simmons jumped on the basketball court, started balling, started doing some big time things, Philadelphia fans would forget. People forget real quick, real fast. They don't remember very long. And in the society that we live in, with all the things, all the gadgets, and all the things that we got going on, it's so quick we're quick to forget, right? So people forget. But I will say this: when it comes to Ben Simmons, they ain't gonna forget this. Philadelphia fans ain't gonna forget this, and they're gonna light him up. They're gonna light him up. They're going to light Ben Simmons up when he returns to Philadelphia, whether it's this year or whether it's next year. They're going to hand it to him. And it would be interesting to see if Ben Simmons, decides not to play in those games. Nah, he'll play in those games, but I don't think he's going to play this year. I think I'd be shocked if Ben Simmons is at Wells Fargo Center on March 10th. I'd be shocked. I'd be absolutely shocked. But at the same time, you're Brooklyn. You're the 8th spot in the Eastern Conference. You can't be messing around. You got to win every basketball game you can. So if Ben Simmons is ready and right, put him on the basketball court because you need him. Let me go back to the Cavs for a second. Let me go back to the Cleveland Cavaliers for a second. Top 4 defense in the NBA, one of the big time defenders. What they have on that team, they got Cleveland. We can sleep on the Cleveland Cavaliers, and I get it, I understand, but Cleveland, this team just plays the right way. And interestingly enough, they've beaten some very good teams along the way. This team is not a scrub. They haven't beaten the little sisters of the poor, this Cavaliers team. They've beaten some very good teams along the way. You remember that if you look at Cleveland earlier in the season, they went on that West Coast trip, went into Denver, went into the Clippers, right? And beat them. They've beaten some good teams along the way, man. It really had. This is not a team that is just beaten up on bad teams. They've beaten some solid teams. They beat Brooklyn, right? And according to J.B. Bickerstaff, that was the signature win for the Cavaliers when they beat Brooklyn at the time on Martin Luther King Day. They beat the Bucks. They've beaten some good teams this year, this Cavalier basketball team. And I think, crazy as it sounds, they are legitimate contenders in the Eastern Conference. And they very easily could come out of the East. It wouldn't shock me if the Cavaliers came out of the East. Their coach, J.B. Bickerstaff, has done a great job with this team. In addition, JB said something last night after their win over the San Antonio Spurs. He felt like this group, the group that they have, is special. Rondo says the group that they have could be a team that could compete for a championship possibly. And Rondo's been around this league a long time and has been on championship caliber teams, won 2 titles with the Lakers and the Celtics. So he knows what that looks like. And he knows, and the chemistry that the Cavaliers have is just off the charts. Their chemistry is perfect. They have great chemistry. And I was wondering, Kobe Altman, he's a guy that likes to wheel and deal. And I was wondering whether or not he was going to wheel and deal, do some more things for this Cavalier team. I say leave it alone. I was saying leave it alone. Don't do anything. Leave that alone, right? You got the chemistry. Leave it alone. Don't do anything stupid. Here's what I also will say. Um, interestingly enough, I think, you know, Colin Sexton, a guy, last year, 24 points a game, an efficient scorer last season, but it didn't translate to wins. I think LeVert is the better fit. I think his size, LeVert, 6'6". His size is definitely, you get more size on the court. Obviously, he's a bucket. He can score the basketball. I just think LeVert is a better fit than Sexton. And I know Sexton could be a restricted free agent, and it should be interesting to see what happens there. I don't know if he's coming back, but I think if he does come back, I do think Colin Sexton would be a great six-man. I think instant offense off the bench, Colin Sexton would be that. And so we'll see what happens there with Cleveland. But again, they're a team that definitely can compete in the Eastern Conference. They're a team that definitely has championship aspirations this season. Crazy. Can you see Philly making the finals? Yes, I can. Yes, I can. I can see the Philadelphia 76ers making the finals this year. Definitely. Key is injuries, health, right? Embiid has to stay healthy. They got to stay healthy. They're obviously, and we know Embiid's injury history, but he has to stay healthy. If he stays healthy, yes, why not? Why not? Why not? What was Philadelphia missing? What was the biggest thing Philadelphia was missing? An elite player off the dribble that can score. That was the biggest thing that Sixers were missing. They have finally gotten that in James Harden. They have finally gotten an elite player who can do it off the dribble. It took time. It took, took a lot of things. I look at the Philadelphia 76ers, and when they got rid of, when Jimmy Butler went to Miami, obviously they transformed the team. They added Al Horford, and they kept Tobias Harris, giving big time money. Not a very good contract at this point in time, but I was saying run it back. I was saying just run it back with Tobias, Jimmy Butler, Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid, and just see what happens. But obviously, there were reports that Brett Brown and Butler didn't necessarily see eye to eye. Obviously, I think that was a decision, obviously, when they said that they were handing the keys over to Ben Simmons, and they believed in Ben Simmons at that time. It was a mistake. Clearly, it was a mistake because we all know what happened with Ben Simmons, and we all know what happened here today, right? So what happened here today with Ben Simmons finally getting traded to the Brooklyn Nets was something that, I say this, and, we could talk about Ben Simmons and his inability to shoot, but let's not forget all the other things that he does. Let's not forget that he's an elite passer. Let's not forget that he's an elite defender. Let's not forget that he can score the basketball a little bit. Let's not forget that about Ben Simmons. Let's not act like Ben Simmons is a scrub, because he is far from a scrub. Ben Simmons is an all-star, a multiple-time all-star, I believe 3-time all-star. Ben Simmons is we look at Ben Simmons' numbers, right? Looking at Ben Simmons' numbers here, he's not a scrub. The dude is not a scrub. He fills the stat sheet. He's a stat sheet stuffer, right? Last year, 14, 7, and pretty much 7, right? The year before, 16, 8, and pretty much 8, right? So, and the year before that, pretty much 8.8, almost 9 boards a game, almost 8 assists, pretty much 17 points a game. Ben Simmons is not a scrub, right? He's not a scrub, and, the dude can contribute to winning. I think he's a winning player. And I think in the right situation, he's a winning player. I also believe this. I think if Ben Simmons, we don't know what Ben Simmons, we see this every summer. Every summer, Ben Simmons will, it's like clockwork. Ben Simmons will come out and shoot a bunch of jumpers and pick up. And we're like, oh, man, this dude has finally got a jump shot. Oh, my gosh, he's finally going to shoot it. He does it every summer. He teases us. We see him pulling up on making threes and things of that, and pickup games. Like, we're super excited when it comes to Ben Simmons and all that, right? And then he jumps on the basketball court, and he's doing what Ben Simmons has always done, doesn't shoot the basketball, things of that nature. So, I mean, you don't know, right? But maybe this summer was the summer that he finally went into the lab. And even during this extended vacation that he had, maybe he also figured some things out. Maybe he grew confidence. Maybe if he was, getting some assistance, mental health assistance, maybe he saw a sports psychologist. Maybe Simmons saw a sports psychologist who helped him figure out and make him want to shoot the basketball. Maybe he sat down with people. So there was a mental block with Ben Simmons. He played like a guy that had a mental block. He played like a guy who was afraid of failure, who was afraid to shoot the basketball. So he played like a guy who could have benefited from a sports psychologist, which is okay. And so maybe he sat down with a sports psychologist and maybe he figured things out during this time. Maybe he figured all these things out, got the help that he needed to give him the confidence that he needed to be a successful basketball player. Maybe, just maybe that's what happened with Ben Simmons. I don't know. But I will say this. When it comes to Ben Simmons. This kid has ability. This kid is a winning player. And you can win with Ben Simmons. Just didn't win in Philadelphia. And that was mainly because I think the role that he had was too big in terms of the scoring load. You can't rely on his points. The points, don't rely on Ben Simmons' points. And I don't think Brooklyn's going to need his points to that degree the way Philadelphia needed his points last season. And to be honest, that's the way the team was constructed. The team was constructed, where Ben Simmons had to do what Ben Simmons had to do. That's the way the team was constructed. So he had to score a little bit more than maybe he was comfortable with. He had to. So that is that, right? Please make sure you like the video. Please make sure you subscribe to the channel. All right. So, obviously we got a few weeks left in this NBA season before we hit the playoffs. And so it's going to be fun in the East. It's going to be fun in the West. It's going to be very fun in the East. It's going to be very fun in the East. Right? I mean, it's going to be fun. And so I can't wait to see what happens. It's Nets slightly won this trade. Let me think about that. You can make that argument, but I think it's going to be a trade that we look back on and say that both teams won. I think it's going to be that type of trade because I think Philadelphia's window is now, right? And I think, I don't think Brooklyn is going to be able to, they're struggling right now. I don't think they're going to be able to put the pieces back together this season. But I do, and I'm not sleeping on Brooklyn because obviously if I'm any team in the Eastern Conference, I don't want to see the Brooklyn Nets. But I will say this, right? I think we might look back at this deal and we might say both teams won. Obviously, Brooklyn got some draft capital in the draft, in this deal, I should say. And they also got a piece that they were missing in some respect, an elite defender in Ben Simmons. They were kind of missing that guy. And so Brooklyn, I think it's going to be a deal where both teams win. But I can see where someone would say Brooklyn may have slightly won this deal. I can see that. But I think both teams are going to benefit because I think both teams needed what they got in this deal. I think the chemistry, I think Brooklyn needed a guy like Ben Simmons and the things that he brings to his table and his skill set. And obviously, I think Philly needed what James Harden brings. They needed a guy who can do what James Harden does off the dribble. They needed that badly. So both teams, I think, will win. But I also think, I think Philadelphia, it's going to look better for Philadelphia this year. And going forward, who knows what's going to happen. But I think Brooklyn is still, and you got to figure out the situation with Kyrie Irving. And maybe, here's also a thing to look at. COVID numbers are going down. So we could be in a situation where mandates in cities like San Francisco, cities like New York City, cities like Boston, maybe the mandates will be lessened and maybe they'll go away. And so maybe Kyrie will be able to play home games, and also maybe they'll be able to build that chemistry there in Brooklyn. But my only concern with Brooklyn, again, this year is their ability to build the chemistry that they're going to need. I think Philadelphia has a better chance because I think Philadelphia at this point can afford a few bumps in the road just based on where they're at in terms of the standings in the Eastern Conference. Brooklyn, they're the eighth seed at this point in the Eastern Conference. They can't afford a lot. They can't, it's good. Building this chemistry could be bumpy. And I don't know if they can really afford all that bumpiness at this point. Now, again, I said it before, I do believe they'll have enough to be able to, they'll have enough where they're going to be able to be okay and make the playoffs. But I will say this, you never know what can happen. But I do think Philadelphia at this point, fifth seed in the Eastern Conference, they can afford to if the chemistry, putting Harden and Embiid together and building that chemistry, if there's some bumps in the road, I think they can afford that. Brooklyn can't afford the bumps in the road. They can't afford it. And especially when, they lost 9 straight and they're 8th in the Eastern Conference at this point. And so, obviously they have the advantage when it comes to the playing situation. But if you get to 9 and 10, well, that advantage is gone. So if you get to 9 and 10, you got to win 2 games to get to the playoffs. 7 and 8 only have to win 1 game. If you're 9 and 10, you got to win 2. So, you know what I mean? So the reality is, if you're Brooklyn, well, I should say you'll have 2 chances to win 1, right? But here's also the thing: if you're Brooklyn, you don't want to get to 8th is the lowest you want to get. You want to be in a situation where you got to win multiple games in a playing situation. You don't want to do that. You don't want to be that. I just think at this point, chemistry could be an issue for both teams, but Philadelphia has the leeway. They have the leeway where they can afford some bumps in the road. Boston Celtics, Boston's playing some good basketball right now. They also got Derek White. Derek White is a good acquisition. Derek White can play. He's good. He's solid. Derek White has had issues staying healthy, but Derek White is decent. That's a decent player. And he was supposed to be one of the building blocks for those young Spurs. But Derek White, he's decent, man. Derek White's a decent player. And that's a decent addition to your team. Again, he's had trouble staying healthy. But Derek White is that's a solid addition for the Boston Celtics. Now, I'm not going to sit here and I'm not going to sit here and say Boston's going to be a team to watch out for in the Eastern Conference, but I'm not going to sleep on them because you got Jason Tatum, you got Jaylen Brown, 2 legitimate stars in this league, and you got a Derek White Derek White is no scrub. Derek White is no scrub. So again, I don't expect Boston to. I'll say this: Boston's dangerous. I will say Boston's dangerous because you got a guy in Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown who can put the ball in the basket, so they can steal games in your building. So yeah, I'm with that. I think Boston, that's a good deal for them. Sixers got fleeced and it serves Murray right so much. Harden's game isn't as relevant with the new rules. James Harden's still James Harden in my mind. James Harden can still put the ball in the basket at an elite level. Great players, they adjust. They adjust to rules. They adjust to those things. Harden is just not a byproduct of the rules. Look at his numbers. The numbers still are legit. Dude's averaging 22 and 10 to go along with 8 rebounds. So the numbers are still legit. You're right. So, and now, he's a guy with Durant and granted, they haven't played many games together, Durant, Harden, and Kyrie. But he's a guy, James Harden, that can still put the ball in the basket. So, the opportunities might be more in Philadelphia, right? So I think, great players adjust. James Harden is still legit, still big time. He's fine. He's fine. Now, he is 32 years old, right? So, again, Philadelphia with Embiid and always the uncertainty with his health have a short window, right? So Embiid is 27 years old in his prime at this point. So Embiid's in his prime, and a guy who is the MVP of this league at this point. So, but how many years can you trust that Embiid is going to be healthy? So with Harden at 32, these Sixers now got like a 2 to 3 year run now where it is championship or bust. It is championship or bust for the next 2 to 3 years for the Philadelphia 76ers. It is championship or bust. So Harden's 32 years old, Embiid 27 years old. Again, the uncertainty with Embiid in his health. Harden 32. I still think he could play an elite level for the next 2 to 3 years at least. And I'm saying at least. So that run, that window is now. The championship window, and Philadelphia has been in championship mode for a while now, clearly. But now it's definitely championship or bust when it comes to the Philadelphia 76ers. It is championship or bust. So we'll see if it will be championship or bust. Cavs will sweep the 76ers. Well, interestingly enough, Cleveland hasn't played Philadelphia all year, play them on Saturday. And so Philadelphia and the Cleveland will play four times this year. They still haven't played, so they got 4 games against each other. So let's see if the Cavs sweep the Sixers in those 4 games. Let's see, right? We look at this. Cavs ain't got any experience lucky to make semis. So, yes, experience matters. And if you look at the Cavaliers and their roster and their lineup, it's a lot of youth. There's a lot of young guys on the Cleveland Cavaliers. That roster is full of young guys. I mean, they're young guys. I mean, let's look at their core. I mean, 23, Jared Allen. He's played in the playoffs. Darius Garland, 22, never played in the playoffs. 27, LeVert, obviously he's been in the playoffs. I'm just looking at the starting lineup. Markkanen, 24. I believe the Bulls made the playoffs one of the years he was there. Yeah. And Evan Mobley, 20. So there is a lot of youth in that starting lineup. There is a lot of youth in that starting lineup. So, yeah, you're right. I mean, the experience thing is key. Appreciate it, Dwayne. The experience thing is key. I mean, you have to learn how to win in the playoffs. That's why some teams go through the process of having to lose to learn how to win in the playoffs. Magic Johnson, right? I know Magic Johnson came in right away and won the championship, but he's had some moments where he struggled to get to that mountaintop at times. More so, Michael Jordan is the better example. Michael Jordan took him, 7, 8 years to finally win a championship. He had to learn. He had to get beat up and beat down by those Detroit Pistons to ultimately learn how to win an NBA title. So the Cavaliers, with all that youth that they have, and here's also the thing. The chemistry, going back to the chemistry, they have some great chemistry in Cleveland. If you watch the Cavs, the chemistry is amazing, right? You want to bottle that chemistry up and use it each and every year. But here's what I will say, even with that chemistry, the youth might get in the way come playoff time. The playoffs are a different animal, man. They're a different animal. You play a team 6, 7 times, right? They know all your tendencies, right? The playoffs are another animal. And Cleveland, guys, they had their core hasn't experienced that level of play. And look, Cleveland is obviously in a position where they're one of the top teams in the East, and they're obviously in a position where they possibly could ultimately make a deep playoff run. Cleveland can make a deep playoff run. Don't get it twisted. But youth. So right now, right, at this point, Cleveland, I believe, is the 4th seed. Philadelphia is the 5th seed. If Cleveland were to play the Sixers in the playoffs at this point, I think we would say that the Cleveland would have home court advantage, but I would say Philadelphia is the favorite. If the Cavaliers matched up against the Philadelphia 76ers in the first round of these playoffs, I think Philadelphia would have the edge. I think Philadelphia would have the edge because they're seasoned. Embiid has been to the playoffs and experienced playoffs numerous times. James Harden has experienced the playoffs numerous times. So I do believe that, if Philadelphia were to play the Cavaliers in the first round of the playoffs, I think Philadelphia would be the favorite. And I think the main reason is experience, but I think Philadelphia might just be a smidge more talented than the Cavaliers. But again, I think it would be a good series. And it would be criminal to me if the Cavaliers, with the great season that they've had, would stay at the fourth spot and have to play the Philadelphia 76ers in the first round. Because I think they ultimately would go out in the first round. I still think the Cavaliers have a great season, but I do think they would go out in the first round if they had to play the Philadelphia 76ers in that first round. It would, I don't, and here's also a thing. It should be interesting, the matchups. They're going to play 4 times starting Saturday. They're going to play 4 times this year. They haven't played at all this year to this point, which is odd. 50 games in, they haven't played. But they're going to play. They're going to play each other. And it might give us a glimpse of what possibly could happen if these two teams were to match up in the playoffs. I don't know. Jeremy Grant apparently is stayed put in Detroit. Maybe that's something that could happen in the offseason. Who knows? But you look at marketing. I think what Cleveland has, and with that length on that front court, right? I mean, we were talking about in this league a couple of years ago. We talked about small ball and the Golden State Warriors and what they did. And everybody's playing small, small, small. The bigs are obsolete. And Cleveland said, you know what? No, we're going different. We're going opposite. We don't believe bigs are obsolete. We're going big, big, and big all through the front line, right? And what makes Cleveland work is the athleticism they have on that front line with Mobley and Jared Allen. And Markkanen is not a bad athlete. So, yeah. I mean, for sure. I mean, Cleveland is a team that could make a run, but if they play the Sixers in the first round, it could end quickly for the Cavaliers. And that would be sad considering how surprising and what they've done this season. That would be sad. The Philly really improved. The Nets needed defense more than scoring. Yeah, Philly definitely improved because they needed an elite guy off the dribble. They needed a guy who can put the ball in the basket, and Philadelphia didn't have that. They were depending on Tobias Harris at times to close games. No, they needed a guy, and as good as Embiid is, it's hard for a center to close a game because you remember Shaq and Kobe? Kobe was the closer for the Lakers because of his ability off the dribble. Now, Shaq was the best player on that team for a long time, and obviously those were Shaq's teams. But Kobe was the one that closed. So it's very difficult for a center to be your closer. Very difficult. So now you look at what the Sixers have in James Harden, an elite player off the dribble. They need an elite. They look at the teams who, right? Let's just look at the teams. We look at Milwaukee. They won last year, and Giannis was tremendous in the NBA Finals. He was tremendous, right? But look who they played. They played the Phoenix Suns and Chris Paul, an elite player still big time off the dribble. Devin Booker, an elite player off the dribble, right? You need bucket getters in the playoffs. You need guys that can just eat buckets and get buckets. And James Harden gets buckets. It's that simple. James Harden gets buckets. And, Philly needed a guy badly who can get buckets. They needed a guy who can get buckets. And so, yeah. Philly has improved. And I also agree with you. I think Brooklyn has improved. I think both teams have improved. I think this is a great deal for both teams. But I also said, as I said earlier, it's just going to be harder for Brooklyn because, there still could be some chemistry issues for both teams, and that may take time. And Brooklyn right now is the 8th seed in the Eastern Conference. So, there might be some bumpiness, but they can't afford much bumpiness, Brooklyn. So, I don't think Brooklyn's going to be able to turn it around and be a team that gets to the NBA Finals this year. I don't think so. I mean, it's very difficult. I believe I think it was a stat out there. A team has never made it to the NBA Finals after losing 7 games in a row. I believe I saw that stat out there. And I'll I'll look for it later. But I mean, yes. I mean, it's hard to just turn it on in this league. It's not that simple to just turn it on in this league. And Brooklyn would be asked to almost turn it on. But it's not impossible. It's not impossible. It's definitely not impossible. So yeah, Brooklyn does need to get healthy. And obviously they wouldn't be in this spot if they were healthy. Clearly they wouldn't be in this spot if they were healthy. Clearly Brooklyn wouldn't lose 9 games in a row if Kevin Durant was there. Clearly. So yeah, health has not been on Brooklyn's side. But at the same time, it is what it is. And so at this point, and Brooklyn, obviously Kevin Durant went to Brooklyn to win an NBA title. We thought, and you could argue last year, if Kyrie Irving doesn't get hurt against the Milwaukee Bucks and James Harden pretty much playing on one leg against the Milwaukee Bucks, you could argue that the Brooklyn Nets would be in the NBA Finals. You could make that argument for sure. But part of this thing of winning championships in this NBA is having to be able to stay healthy, stay available. And unfortunately, Kyrie has had difficult time staying available. He has. I mean, really, he's had hard times staying available. So, in terms of Kyrie, do you trust his health? I don't think that's something you completely trust. You don't completely trust that Kyrie can stay healthy. And also, again, at this point, Kyrie's a part-time player. He's a part-time player. And so you're trying to rely on a part-time player to win an NBA title. I mean, it's going to be difficult, man. That's difficult. And it's, Kyrie, you agree or disagree with the stance that he took. That's the stance that he took. It is what it is. But at the end of the day, it's cost his team. It's going to cost his team, at least this year. And again, maybe the COVID mandates will be gone. And then once the COVID mandates are gone, then guess what? Kyrie and the Nets could be successful and win NBA titles. Who knows? But there's a mandate in place. He can't play home games. You got Ben Simmons coming into the mix. You got to figure out the chemistry. That's not going to be easy. And we don't even know if Ben Simmons is going to be available. And even if he is available, we don't even know if he's going to be right physically. You don't know. So there's a lot of questions when it comes to Brooklyn. I think more questions than answers. Well, maybe that's a stretch. But there's questions with Brooklyn. Philadelphia, question is Ben Simmons staying healthy. If Joel Embiid staying healthy. Joel Embiid stays healthy. If Joel Embiid stays healthy, if he stays healthy, and James Harden is James Harden, and then people say, well, Philadelphia could lose something in terms of defense. You still got Matisse Thybulle there. You still got Danny Green there. Solid defender. You still got a rim protector in Joel Embiid. Philadelphia, this is still, even though they gave up Seth Curry, I would love to have kept Andre Drummond if I'm the Sixers, because Andre Drummond is the best backup center in basketball. I mean, this dude has played some solid basketball for the Philadelphia 76ers. You wish you could have kept him. But at the end of the day, you have a chance to get James Harden. You had a chance to get James Harden, one of the best scorers in basketball, a prolific scorer. And, Tobias Harris, you talk about Tobias Harris being on and off. Tobias Harris has actually played some decent basketball of late. And Tobias Harris doesn't stink, right? The problem that we have with Tobias Harris, it's not his skill set per se. I think it's the money that he makes. He's making a lot of money. And Tobias Harris is a 19-point scorer a game, right? Darn near a 20-point scorer a game. Closer to 19, obviously, than 20. But he's a scorer. And, you look at the last 2 games, he had a 30-point game against the Phoenix Suns. He had a 23-point game against Chicago. You look at Memphis last Monday, he had a 31-point game. And that was a big win for Philadelphia because they didn't have Embiid that night, and Tyrese Maxey went crazy. But so Tobias is not a bad player, and he's in a role now that is very suited to his game, right? He's not a guy that you have to depend on down the stretch to make a bucket. You got James Harden for that. You got Joel Embiid for that, right? But Tobias Harris can make a bucket. Tobias Harris does not stink. I just think it's the money that a lot of people have. That's the biggest issue is the money. The money, the money, the money. If Tobias Harris, had a different salary, I think we would talk about him a little differently. Because I think that's the way we were talking about him when he was with the Clippers, right? We were talking about how good he was. That's the way we were talking about him, at times in his career. But also, I just think, right, this is just, he's better. He's not, if you're relying, and I think one of the biggest issues the Sixers had, and one of the reasons, when they chose to keep Tobias and Jimmy Butler went to Miami, the thought was at that point that Tobias Harris was going to be the closer. I remember listening to that press conference, and Tobias Harris, when they introduced Tobias Harris and Al Horford and everything, Tobias Harris talking about he was going to be the closer for this team, and that's not who Tobias Harris is. He's not garbage. Tobias Harris is not garbage, but that's not who he is. That's who James Harden is. That is who James Harden is. Now, we'll see what happens. And Philadelphia made the move that they had to make. And again, we could talk about, and the Ben Simmons era is finally over. It's an era that, started out with promise. It's an era that, Philly tanked pretty much to get Ben Simmons, to be in a position to get Ben Simmons. But ultimately, it never went where it needed to go. He couldn't, and it wasn't all his fault. Because we talk about 2019 against Toronto. That was the year when you talk about the Philadelphia 76ers, that was the year where they easily could have won an NBA title. Because that's the year, Milwaukee, Giannis was still learning how to win. They had Kawhi Leonard, and Kawhi was crazy. Kawhi went absolutely crazy in 2019. He was just downright ridiculous. But you look at the Philadelphia 76ers, it opened up for him because you look at the Golden State Warriors, Klay Thompson towards ACL. You got Kevin Durant towards Achilles. So Golden State was a shell of themselves. And I don't even think Toronto would have won that series if Golden State was healthy, but it is what it is. It's all about availability. So give Toronto credit. They were available. But at the same time, man, right? Philadelphia, that was their moment, their situation. That was their time. That was their time because it opened up for them. And I think they could have beat the Bucks because they matched up fairly well against the Bucks that particular season. So I do think they could have beat the Bucks in that in the Eastern Conference Finals, and I also do think they could have beat the Golden State Warriors because it opened up for them because Kevin Durant towards Achilles, because Klay Thompson towards ACL. So it opened up for the Philadelphia 76ers. They just didn't take advantage of it. Joel Embiid didn't take advantage of it. You remember that series? Joel Embiid was he had that big game 3. You remember he had that big time dunk down the lane and everything. And then the next game, called Brett Brown in the morning, and there was some talk about, he wasn't feeling well and things of that nature. They didn't seize the moment. And then that game 4, he was awful against Toronto. Toronto ultimately was able to even the series up. So, Joel Embiid, and that's what I'm talking about in terms of the playoffs. That's what I'm talking about learning. That's what I'm talking about going through the bumps and all the different roadblocks and all the different things you have to go through in order to win an NBA title, in order to learn how to win an NBA title. That takes time. That takes losing a couple times in the playoffs in order to get that right. So that concerns me. That's what I'm concerned about in terms of the Cleveland Cavaliers. It's the youth. The chemistry is great. The Cavaliers have great chemistry. It's the youth that scares me. Youth. So that's going to be interesting. It's very hard to win in the NBA. It's very hard to win an NBA title. It's very hard. It's not easy. And you got to learn how to do it. Michael Jordan learned how to do it. LeBron James learned how to do it. Shaq and Kobe learned how to do it. Like, these guys learned how to win. They learned how to win, right? It's a process. You don't win overnight. You learn how to win. You learn how to win. And if you look at those teams, you look at Jordan's Bulls, Shaq and Kobe, they all learned how to win. And LeBron James learned how to win. And so it's a process. And Philadelphia, Joel Embiid, is learning how to win. And based on the way he's playing this season, he's stepped up his game. He's figured some things out. He's gotten himself in the shape that he needs in order to be the dominant guy that he wants to be. And he's been dominant this season. Very dominant. And one of the reasons, despite not having Ben Simmons, that Philadelphia is 32-22 and, 2.5 games out of the top spot in the Eastern Conference. So please please subscribe to the channel. So let's look at it. Philly got fleeced in the steal. They made the league look bad with the handling of Ben Simmons. Like I thought the Cavs took one when they let Porter Jr. go for nothing, but we got cards for nothing. So let's look at that, right? Yeah, Embiid did cry. Let's look at that. I don't think Philadelphia handled this situation bad. I'm blaming Ben Simmons. I'm most definitely blaming Ben Simmons for what transpired here. Look, Philadelphia has been waiting for you to shoot. Philadelphia has been waiting for you to develop a jump shot. Philadelphia has been waiting. And you never grew your game. Now, he did grow his game on the defensive end. Ben Simmons has turned himself into an elite defender, but he never grew his game on the offensive end. He was the same player that came out of LSU on the offensive end. He never grew his game. And I think Ben Simmons is one of these dudes, right? He's one of these guys that basketball in some respect may have came easy for him. He's also one of these guys who says, you know what? I can do what I want to do and be what I want to be and still be a multiple-time All-Star. I'll say this, right? Ben Simmons could still be the same player. Ben Simmons if Ben Simmons never developed a jump shot, right? Ben Simmons still could go to the Hall of Fame with all the things that he does. And remember, it's not that difficult to get in the Hall of Fame when it comes to basketball. It's not difficult to get in the Basketball Hall of Fame. I don't think it's it's not one of the more difficult Hall of Fames to get into. But Ben Simmons is a guy. If this dude never ever decided to grow his game, he could very easily be a Hall of Famer. Easily. Multiple-time All-Star, right? And I'm talking about on the offensive end. If he never grew his game in the offensive end, because clearly he's still a big-time defender. So if he is that big-time defender, that elite defender that we all know and love, right? If he is that guy, he's going to win Defensive Player of the Year awards. He's going to win one or two, right? And he's going to be a guy who's going to get in the All-Star game because he's a stat sheet stuffer. He stuffs the stat sheet. So yes, I do believe that if Ben Simmons never changed his game, this dude could make it to the Hall of Fame. And he could be a star. He's a star. But in order for Ben Simmons to be a superstar, in order for Ben Simmons to take that next step, he's got to develop something on the offense game. I mean, I'm not asking him to be Steph Curry, right? We're not asking him to be that. No one's asking him to be Klay Thompson. They're asking him to be able to shoot maybe like Magic Johnson, right? Magic Johnson wasn't a great shooter. He wasn't a great shooter, but, he shot it and he was efficient and he did what he had to do. That's all we're asking Ben Simmons to be. And I don't think that's a lot, right? I know Brett Brown a couple of years ago said, he wanted him to shoot, I think it was 2 to 3 threes a game. Obviously, that didn't happen. So he's a guy also that maybe doesn't handle failure well, right? Because maybe things came so easy for him on that basketball court, and he had so much success on the basketball court. He may not be able to handle failure very well. Because here's the thing, right? In this league, you got to be able to, as a point guard, to be able to shoot it a little bit. And Ben Simmons wouldn't shoot it at all. He would run away from jump shots, right? He's passing it off, right? It was just the Philadelphia's offense at times looked awkward. The guy would just run, Ben Simmons would just run down, go into the lane, and sometimes just pass it back out, right? Wouldn't shoot, wouldn't do anything, just pass it back out. So Ben Simmons is a guy, because here's also the thing. He couldn't play baseball. He would have a hard time playing baseball because, baseball, you go 3 for 10. That's great. That's 300. So he would have a hard time playing baseball because, you're going to lose more than you win. But if you look at him, right, I mean, part of being great is to not be afraid to fail and not running away from the challenge and not being able to risk it all. Sometimes you got to risk it all. And Ben Simmons just didn't seem like he was comfortable enough in his skin to risk it all. Risk it all. And for him, that could be shooting a jump shot. He just didn't seem comfortable doing that. And it's clear that he wasn't comfortable doing it. Right? And maybe it just did something to his confidence when he missed jump shots. Maybe it just did something confidence when he missed shots in general. Right? And look, here's the thing. When you have that issue, that problem, that situation, you need to see someone. You need to see someone because unfortunately, failure is a part of life. The goal is to win more than you lose, but you're going to lose. You're going to lose a lot. You're going to win a lot too if you do the right things, but you're going to lose too. And so it's a part of life. And maybe Ben Simmons is just not comfortable enough in his skin to understand that. And he's only 25 years old. We forget this dude is only 25 years old. He's only 25 years old and one of the biggest stages. You're on the NBA stage. You're 25 years old. You're still trying to figure out who you are as a man, as a person. And then you're trying to figure out who you are as a basketball player. This is a lot of figuring out. And sometimes that comes easy for some, and for others, it's a struggle. And it appears to be somewhat of a struggle for Ben Simmons because he's had a hard time determining and wanting to shoot the basketball. He just won't do it. No matter what position you put him in, he just won't do it. We can beg him. We just won't do it. Won't do it. It's okay. It's okay to miss. It's okay to miss. It's okay to miss. Jetty Osman said his team motivates him when he misses. Your boy's got to like you. So, yeah, it's okay to – and look, the Philadelphia fan base would pretty much gave the man a standing ovation when he hit a corner three in a regular season game. So, that tells you how bad it became in terms of Ben Simmons and his refusal to shoot the basketball. The fans would groan and moan and groan when he had an open look and wouldn't take it. They would moan and groan when he had an opportunity to take a jump shot. The fan base just wanted him to shoot, and he wouldn't do it. He wouldn't shoot for whatever reason. He was afraid, maybe. Afraid of failure, possibly. It's possible. There's a lot of people out here afraid of failure. A lot of people, right? It's like if you go to a club, you won't talk to a girl at all because you're afraid someone's going to say no to you. It happens. People are afraid of failure. A lot of people are. It's not uncommon. Some people won't do anything because they don't want to fail. They hate to fail so much that they won't do it. They won't do it. And so Ben Simmons' life, I don't want to say life is easy because life is easy for no one. But Ben Simmons, in terms of maybe his basketball life, it came easy. He was a prodigy, man. There was comparisons. This dude coming out, some LeBron James comparisons. And, some people believe that if he developed the jump shot, he would be LeBron James. I think that's a stretch, obviously. That's a little bit of a stretch. But I do think Ben Simmons is a guy who, if he had a little bit of a jump shot, would be a much better player. The dude is elite in all areas of his game except for one thing, his ability to shoot jump shots. He's elite in a lot of areas of his game. He's not interested. He's not an elite finisher. He's not an elite finisher because there's times where he'll get into the lane and he'll try to throw up a little floater. And it looks awkward. So he's not, but he is strong to the cup when in terms of dunks and things of that nature. But he is an elite player in a lot of areas of his game. So kudos to Ben Simmons. This is his chance, his opportunity, his moment to, he got what he wanted. He wanted to get traded. He wanted to change the scenery. And he got a good situation. there was talks he could have went to Sacramento. That's not a good situation, right? He's got a good situation here in Brooklyn. He's still competing for a championship. He's still in a position where he could win a title, right? And he could win a title this year. I'm not dismissing Brooklyn. I don't think it's going to happen. But we can't dismiss Brooklyn either. He's still got Kevin Durant, still got Kyrie Irving, and now you have Ben Simmons. But again, he's in still a great position. Now, the pressure is still on. The pressure is still on for him to perform. He went from Philadelphia to New York. So he dealt with the Philadelphia media and the Philadelphia fan base who was hard on him. Now, fortunately for him, he's going to Brooklyn and not the Knicks, because the Brooklyn fan base is a little different than the Knicks fan base, right? So fortunately for him, he's going to Brooklyn and not fortunately he's playing at the Barclays Center and not Madison Square Garden. Fortunately for him. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how the fans react to Ben Simmons when he's passing up jump shots. Or maybe he's sat down with somebody and not going to pass up jump shots no more. And maybe he's saying, yes, I can. I will shoot it. I will shoot it. I will shoot. I will not pass the ball. I will shoot it. I will not pass up a dunk. I will shoot it. Shoot. Maybe, him as a psychologist, he's seeing somebody. And there's nothing wrong with seeing someone. In fact, I encourage it. If you got issues, see somebody. Get your help that you need, right? And no use sitting in pride. Sitting in pride will get you nowhere. Sitting in pride will still give you mental issues still, right? You still have those mental issues. You're sitting in pride. Go get the help that you need. Ben Simmons may have gotten the help. He said he got some. They said he got some help. And maybe it's the help that he needed. It's okay. Get the help that you need. You need help? Go get it. Run to it. Don't be afraid to get help, right? Don't sit in pride, because we know what happens with pride. Pride comes before a fall, so you don't want to fall. So put yourself in a position where if you need help, go get the help. And hopefully Ben Simmons got the help they need. Hopefully Ben Simmons can become the player that, I'm a lifelong 76ers fan. So, but I'm saying hopefully Ben Simmons can get the help that he needs. I'm rooting for Ben Simmons to be okay. I'm rooting for Ben Simmons. I hope Ben Simmons goes to Brooklyn and is successful. I hope Ben Simmons decides to shoot jump shots. I hope Ben Simmons continues to be that elite defender and be that elite player. I'm going to still root for Ben Simmons to be successful. But I will say this. I'd be shocked. I'd be shocked if Ben Simmons started shooting jump shots. I'd be shocked. Absolutely shocked. I'd be amazed. I'd be stunned if Ben Simmons started shooting jump shots. I don't think it's going to happen. I think he is who he is. And who he is still a Hall of Fame caliber player. It's still a guy who does a lot of elite things. So, yes, I still think I hope that Ben Simmons will get the confidence and will be able to shoot the basketball going forward. But we're going to get out of here. Please like this video. Please subscribe to the channel. And we will be back talking a little sports, having a little fun doing it. So we're going to get out of here now. Take care of yourself. James Harden is in Philadelphia. Ben Simmons is in Brooklyn. And the Eastern Conference is going to be a lot of fun. See you later.